Broadcasting from the Any Hour Services podcast studios, I'm your host, Mike Wilson, and on this episode, we're going to be talking about where things go after you flush your toilet.
That worked.
Let's go.
That worked.
In the House is a podcast about the major systems in the house: electrical, plumbing, heating, and air conditioning. Each week, I'm joined by a panel of experts. We pick a topic and we discuss it in depth. It's meant to be informative and hopefully bring you some value. I got Matt and I got Chasen with me today. They're managers over the drains and sewer departments at Any Hour Services. And like I mentioned before, we're going to be talking about, and you know, I don't know if it's just guys, but like, I was laughing at the beginning when I said what our topic was going to be. I'm going to try and approach this like a professional. But
what kind of professional?
I don't know. But like I said before, we're going to be talking about what happens to stuff after you flush the toilet. Matt didn't want us to get too specific about the things that we're flushing.
It's poop.
All right. So whatever you're flushing, I guess we could talk about, maybe, I don't know if we'll get to things that you shouldn't be flushing.
No, we definitely can.
But let's just assume that you're using your toilet properly and we're just flushing waste and, things like that. So, I don't know. What happens, Matt?
What happens when you flush the toilet?
Mm-hmm.
Well, we've all talked about the sewer lateral, right? Do you remember that?
Yeah,
talk?
I don't know that we used the word sewer lateral because we call it different things. But like if you've heard us talking about your sewer main line, so the main pipe that takes everything away from the home and connects to the city, that's also called a sewer lateral.
And so keep in mind, we're talking about the average home, not septic tanks. And we've talked about septic tanks.
Yes.
We're going to be talking about a home that's hooked to the city sewer main.
Got it.
And so when you flush the toilet on a normal home connected to the city, it is going through the sewer main on your home. It runs to wherever that may go, maybe in the back of your home, out in the front of the house, in the middle of the road. It could be across the road in front of your house, in the neighbor's yard is what we've seen them. It will run whatever that distance is, and it'll drop into a larger main.
Now, when you say it drops in, do you mean that the pipe physically goes down?
So, yeah, it will tap into the main is what they will call it. They drill and put a fitting that connects to the pipe, but it will be between 1 o'clock and 3 o'clock on the pipe if you were looking at a pipe on a clock. And the reason being, it is dropping in. It can't be too close to the bottom or else it'll just be full of sewage because there's half a pipe full of sewage in that pipe all the time.
So is there like if you imagine the lateral going along, does it have like a 45 degree that it taps in at that 1 o'clock?
Exactly.
Yeah.
If it was a picture perfect, you'd have your sewer main, your lateral running in at a 2%, and then a 45 angling right into the main.
Got it.
And that tap would be somewhere between 1 o'clock and 3 o'clock on the pipe.
Got it.
Once it has dropped into that main, those sewer mains are typically between 8 and 42 inch, up to 42 inch big.
A city sewer line is 42 inches?
Yeah.
Yeah, and in some areas, like highly populated areas, like not really what we have around here in Utah, but they can even be bigger.
Really? So when we say 4-inch, 6-inch, 42-inch, is that diameter?
Yes.
Is that radius?
That's the inside diameter of the pipe.
Got it. So from one inside side to the other, 42 inches or 6 inches or whatever.
Yep.
Okay. So what size do we typically have around here?
Around here in most neighborhoods, you're going to have somewhere between 8 and 12.
Got it.
That's the most common what we see around here. But then when you get into some of the areas, it all flows downhill to a central location, and the closer you get to that sewer treatment center, the bigger those pipes are going to be because there's more flowing into it.
Got it.
And so in areas where you're real close to that treatment center, they'll be the bigger sizes.
Gotcha. So are those sewer treatment plants, or is that what they are?
Mm-hmm.
Sewer treatment plant? Are they usually at the lowest elevation in a city or wherever?
That's the goal. Some just because of the way geography works, or topography, I guess is the right word. You don't always have that option. And so then you get into real technical systems with lift stations where it actually flows to a place where there's a pump to lift it up again and then flow downhill. And then sometimes it goes through multiple lift stations to get to that sewer treatment plant. But ideally, that sewer treatment plant will be at the lowest point of that system.
Okay. So what are we wanting to get across in this episode today?
Well, one thing that I find interesting when you're talking sewer mains, lift stations, when you're in a lift station, it's a forced main to where you're pressurizing it and you can move lots of waste down a pipe with a smaller diameter pipe. When you're doing a gravity system where it's just on slope, we've talked in our sewer mains for our homes on our laterals. We've used 2% quite a bit on the slope that it should have, a 1/4 inch per foot. What determines the slope on a pipe is the size of the pipe. And so the larger pipe you can go, the flatter you can go on your pipe. And so on our 4-inch pipe, as you've pointed out, that's pretty small compared to the city mains, right?
Sure.
You can go as flat on an 8-inch pipe as 0.5%. So less than 0.5% on a line you can lay a main at, because it's designed to always have a quarter. It's to the spring line, so there's 3 inches of that pipe is always in water. So that's one thing that I've found interesting. I don't know, I can tell you don't find that very interesting. I mean, that's pretty cool, isn't it?
So, I'm sorry that my face did not register the level of excitement inside.
He's just so baffled that his face can't catch up.
Yeah, I've never had to communicate that level of excitement using only facial features.
Well, we'd appreciate it if you'd do better.
So, when you're talking about forced mains, unforced mains, typically the treatment plants are at the lower point of the cities. Around here, we've got Utah Lake, we've got Great Salt Lake. That's where most of the treatment plants are, and they're down lower where the lakes are because it's a natural lake where water's running. Once it starts its journey, you flush the toilet, it runs through your line, it drops in, like we talked, into the sewer main, whatever that size may be, typically 8 to 12 inch. Some of the ones running through Salt Lake are close by treatment plants. There's some bigger mains out there that homes are connected right into it. Mm-hmm. But it starts its journey, and depending on where you're at, if you're in the Utah County area where we're at, almost everything goes to Utah Lake. It goes to a treatment plant.
Okay.
Yeah, and then it goes to Utah Lake. But the treatment
plant...
Because
there are jokes about things pumping directly into Utah Lake.
They're not a joke.
We've seen it.
I mean, for years, that's the way it was in Utah Lake, is it just went right into the lake. But let's follow this journey, okay? So depending on where you live, if you're higher up in the valley, it's going to go through just multiple lines. It's
miles and
miles of pipe. And it's going to go, it could start out as an 8-inch line, work its way up to as big as a 42 and a 60-inch. I installed a 60-inch line from Lehigh all the way to Saratoga Springs back in 96, and that line is always almost half full,
A 60-inch pipe in Saratoga Springs?
Yeah, I installed it. It was out of the treatment plant in American Fork, but it ended up to Lehigh, across Lehigh, right on the edge of the lake, and it's what all of Saratoga Springs, Eagle Mountain drops into.
Wow.
So, it goes through miles of pipe. Once it hits the sewer treatment plant, it will drop in, and it'll go through a screen. Once it hits that screen, it's kind of separating all big debris, basically before it gets to the grinder. The grinder is just what it sounds like. The grinder is something that kind of just grinds and mushes, and it goes through a smaller screen. That stuff that is caught by the screen is whisked up and actually put in a dumpster that goes to the landfill. The water, the liquid that goes past the grinder and the second screen, it goes into the treatment area. It will be...
What's that face for?
The treatment is, in my mind, maybe I just always have looked at it wrong. I've always pictured some chemical treating or something. The treatment is treated by the sun. The sun is the treatment.
And the bacteria.
the bacteria that's naturally growing and the sun work together. But there's big, round, open areas of the waste, and it is sitting under treatment, and it's treated to the point to where they feel it's clean enough, and then it's released into the lake.
And they do test it. They test the water a little bit before they let it just dump right into the lake to make sure it is cleaner.
So in my mind, I was actually listening to the Joe Rogan podcast, and they were talking about, I don't remember exactly what they were talking about, but they actually mentioned like this big tube in Florida where the wastewater is like going into the ocean. And so when you talked about,
I've seen this.
When you talked about the stuff piping into Utah Lake, that is what I envisioned. So what you're saying is like this stuff right here is considered clean and treated?
Yeah.
As far as harmful bacteria and things, yeah.
It's not clean. It's
But it's
just not.
safe.
It's got the bacteria.
But it's ready to dilute?
It's got the bacteria that won't kill you is out of it. It still has bacteria in it. And
So-
you're going to get sick from drinking it. You're just not going to die immediately.
You get sick from drinking most natural water, though.
Yeah.
But no, that image is not incorrect.
And so over at the, I'll just say a lake. Over in a lake where I know where the outlet is,
One particular.
we water ski in that area the first of the year because the water's always warmer there. I'm not exaggerating. It is the warm spot of the lake to go start. The beginning of the season, you go play in that area because the water's at least 10 degrees warmer.
Have
right
you
there.
ever heard the joke, what do you call Lake Powell without the P? 10 feet deep.
Okay, so let me wrap my head around this. I'm gonna repeat because like I get my brain like gets distracted and goes off. So while you were talking, I may have missed something, but you're saying that all of the stuff collects into this one big pipe, and then it's flowing to the city's treatment plant or whatever. But at that place, there's grates and filters of sorts where it's like collecting the big stuff. That stuff gets skimmed off the top and then gets sent to a landfill, and then what's left goes into these holding ponds or holding things, and it the sun's rays will kill the bad stuff, and then once they feel like, okay, cool, it's been quote unquote treated, then it gets pumped into a body of water. For us, it's a lake. What if you live in an area where they don't have a body of water? Like
they'll ditch it to it.
They'll find a way to get it there.
That will be the body of water.
Yeah.
Jordanelle River has got little treatment plants connecting into it that's taking it to the Great Salt Lake. So there's lots of little rivers and stuff that are taking it there.
Okay, so it goes into these bodies of water that you are swishing around in your mouth when you're playing out on the lake.
Yeah. You really shouldn't be. Like,
it's not ideal.
The rivers and lakes are not clean to be swishing around in your mouth at any time.
Now, one of the cool parts, though, is the natural process that rivers filter water through. Gravel in the bottom of the river, things like that. It actually cleans water really well.
I remember being on a rafting trip. It was like a high adventure trip.
How much water did you drink?
Well, no. Like we were in the boats and we were floating the Chattooga River, and there were like rapids and things like that. But when you're on the calm sections of the river, it's like, hey, well, I need to go to the bathroom. What do you do? And the river guides would be like, well, just hop in.
Yeah, just go.
And they'd be like, the solution to pollution is dilution. So anyway, that's interesting. But I guess I've just never, blissful ignorance, I've never connected that like we're pumping this stuff into.
The natural wildlife is also pumping into the same water.
Yes, and I always heard like, hey, that there was an older Indian gentleman that like would be one of the instructors at the Boy Scout camp or whatever, and he had a joke. He's like, the Indians would lean down to the river or they take a sip and they'd be like, there's buffalo upstream or something like that.
Yeah,
and
we've come a long ways. I mean, look at how did we do it before sewer systems?
I don't know.
We dug a hole.
We dug a hole, but in the cities they dumped it in the gutter and it ran down the gutter and out of the city.
Yeah, those big cities like New York and
London
things like
and
that were so
a lot of the
nasty.
plagues.
The pot, you know, you don't have a pot to piss in.
chamber pot.
You know where that came from. You know, you don't even have a pot to piss in. That was their bathroom. You know, they'd fill that after the night and go dump it in the gutter.
And then make breakfast the next morning.
In the same pot.
Yep, biscuits and gravy.
Yeah, but that's the biggest reason they say indoor plumbing has done so much for the health of society is because now all the bacteria that was just running down the gutter is actually going to a healthy place where it's cleaned and treated by nature. And then
Okay, so I'm gonna. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
no, go ahead.
Where I was gonna go, I was gonna move it along and say, okay, well, logic would say, well, that stuff eventually, like, the water's got to come back to the house, and we're talking about how this is in the lake and things. Tell me that it at least gets treated again before it, like there's another treatment area where they do a little bit more than bake it in the sun.
It does, yes.
Okay, so what happens next?
So then after the, you know, especially in an area like ours where we do have some water around, they take that water from the rivers, from the lakes, and it goes to another treatment plant, which now does use chemicals, the chlorines and things like that they put into the water to just make it even cleaner. And that's not because of what we are putting into it through our sewer systems necessarily. It's the nature. There's bacteria in there that you can't drink because we're humans and we're fickle. And so they do more treating before it comes back. But yes, eventually the water that you flush down your toilet will make it through all these processes and everything and eventually come back to your house through your kitchen faucet or whatever. And so, yeah, eventually all that water gets cycled back.
Around here where we have pressurized irrigation, the pressurized irrigation that we water our yards with and everything else, that one gets put on our yards much quicker.
Yeah, it's almost direct from those bodies of water for your secondary water that they call it, pressurized irrigation, those things. That is mostly direct from those bodies of water. Or those reservoirs that you see in neighborhoods where it's a man-made reservoir. That's a lot of times for the sprinklers.
Gotcha. All right. So the chemicals and things that they're using, I mean, they make filtration systems and things. I guess that's why they talk about, the acceptable level of, contamination before it can be pumped to people's homes.
Exactly, because it always starts with some contamination, and then they clean it out and get rid of it, and it becomes acceptable.
I am going to have my kids listen to this episode because I have a like a reverse osmosis little water filter thing on the kitchen counter, and I always drink that, and they always drink the tap water, and I'm like, guys, you need to be drinking this.
So whose bubbles do you want me to burst?
Go ahead.
Reverse osmosis water is very, very, very clean. So clean to the point where the nutrients that you need from the water, magnesium, calcium, those kind of things, are also not there.
See, I'm glad you went there because I get those at McDonald's.
We all have our sources. But that's why you'll see, like, if you read into the fine print on a bottle of distilled water, because it's also the same way, it will say not to use it as your exclusive drinking source. And because your body needs the nutrients, and so you buy the bottles of drinking water rather than the bottles of distilled water, because a lot of times they actually pump those nutrients back into it. And so there's pros and cons to both. But one of the coolest things I heard many years ago is that there has never been and never will be any more or any less water on the earth than there is right now. And so you think about that, and then you think how much water we use. That water is existing on the earth already and always has and always will. And so we have to treat it and clean it. That's the only way to supply the water. You can't just make water out of nowhere. You have to get it that's already here. And the water that's here must be cleaned in order for it to be healthy for us to drink.
So how do I get water that I want to drink that didn't just like come out of Utah Lake?
Well, it's all treated. So even if it is,
but like I don't.
Even if
those chemicals and like things like
that. Where you're at, I know where you live. So, yep, I do.
Dun, dun.
Yours is all coming from springs and drilled wells. So yours is before the Utah Lake. So you don't need to worry about it.
Yeah, but there are
I've
people.
swam in your water tanks before.
Which means while swimming.
I peed in them too. But I did swim in them. And
the one time I decide to edit, he just goes for it.
Right. Yeah, but there's other people listening. Okay, so like you talked about this water treatment stuff. And like, yes, okay, the water is safe to drink, but like the mental image.
So filters, if you want to talk about filters, when we are filtering, we drill down and we drilled wells, we drill deep enough, and the reason why it's got to be deep enough is because the ground is the best filter known to man. When they're making filters or developing springs, the way you develop it is gravel, sand.
You try to emulate the natural process.
The water going through that scrubs all the stuff you want. And so it doesn't seem that clean, but that is a filter. You know, the natural ground is the best filter. And most of the sewage that would be treated, it would have gone through the sewer treatment plant, maybe through the lake, and then into the ground, and then into our drinking source, like through a well or something that's been through the ground hundreds of feet.
So by then it's been filtered many times.
So you burst my bubble on the RO system. Go ahead and burst my kids' bubbles, because I really just need them to like feel foolish.
You'll see now and then reports on the news or whatever of boil orders.
We just had one in Pleasant Grove.
You did.
Yep.
And that's usually E. coli is the most common contaminant.
That's what they claimed.
And E. coli is one of the harder ones to filter out of there, and it's also one of the most prolific. Once it gets into the water, it spreads really well.
I had them drinking that RO water then.
Yeah, and so drinking straight out of the tap, they catch those. But who knows how long it's been there before they caught it. And so there is that risk. But for the most part, drinking straight out of tap's just fine. Drink it straight out of the garden hose for all I care. Apparently you're not supposed to do that anymore, but we always did.
Well, ours is hooked up to secondary water now. I wouldn't recommend it.
I wouldn't drink that one. That's straight up duck poop. It's good for the grass.
Okay. Right. Oh, okay. So,
as far as the treatment that they would do to your water, it's either going to be a little bit of chlorine and what is that stuff?
Fluoride.
Yep. That's all they'll use. Other than that, the water that they're going to be pulling from whatever stream or well is going to pass a bacteria test.
Okay. So, well, let's
go to bottled water for a minute. A lot of them are, spring water, stuff like that. They advertise it as this comes from a natural spring. What that means is that water source for that area is coming from a spring, much like yours at your house. Somebody turned on a tap and filled up a bottle and put a lid on it and sold it as different water. Most of the time, you're drinking the same water in a bottle that you're drinking out of your tap. It's just somebody else's tap.
Okay. So if someone wants to filter their water and have cleaner water, what should they do? Actually, that's not even where you guys wanted to go with this episode, but
no, but there's tons of options for water filtration.
Where you took it after this picture to like what I'm drinking.
Hey, that's where you took it then, because you brought that picture up.
I did bring that up, but like you guys talked about like a sewage pipe pumping right into Utah Lake.
Yeah.
The thing is on this picture, like where it's coming into the water,
it's green.
That and like that's where all the fish are swarming.
It's quite often there's a lot of fish in those areas.
They like to eat it.
But no, there's tons of things you can do to clean your water. If the idea is make it safer, you're more or less wasting your time. But some people like to filter it for taste or for soften it for the way it feels while you're showering.
So like Kool-Aid. So put Kool-Aid in it.
Put Kool-Aid in it if you want taste. Yeah, and so really, there's not really a necessity to cleaning your water any more than it already is. But one thing I do want to go back to is those filter screens at the sewer treatment plant and what they're actually pulling off of there.
Okay, do it.
There's always threats of class action lawsuits and things against flushable wipes and whatnot. And the big reason is that once those get to that sewer treatment plant and they haven't broken down, toilet paper is designed to completely break apart. And so by the time it gets to the sewer treatment plant, it's just part of the water that then gets filtered out the natural way. Those things that don't break apart, feminine hygiene products, flushable wipes, anything you put into the toilet besides toilet paper and waste, it gets caught on those screens and then has to be pulled out of there, put in a dumpster, hauled off to the landfill. And the more we're putting into that, the more we're making it difficult to get that stuff cleaned out. And so there are tons of videos and pictures and things on the internet of some of those real populated areas. Was it New York that had the diaper thing? There were so many diapers being flushed down the system. They had this just mound of diapers and things that they were pulling out of that sewer water as it got to those filters. And so, we all complain about how much we pay in our sewer bill. But that is going to these cleaning efforts, and that is what it's going to go up the harder we make the filtration process. And so the more things we're putting in, not only are we going to clog up our own sewer mains and laterals, which we can definitely go into there, the differences between city and home, but we're also increasing the workload on the filtration process and the manpower and the equipment necessary to get that stuff out of the water. It literally has to be removed from the water. And then when you get into your home, let's talk about the differences between a city pipe and a home pipe. Matt touched on a little bit with how much water's flowing through, but the big reason for the bigger pipes not needing as much grade is just how much water is constantly flowing through there. It never has a chance to stop. And so stuff doesn't have a chance to stop either. Whereas in our pipe, you got thousands and thousands and thousands of gallons water running past your house through the city sewer all the time. In your home, about 500 gallons per day, not just per minute, per day, running through a typical home system. And so that pipe goes stagnant a lot. Where you're not running water, there's not water running flowing through there. So the stuff in the water has a much higher chance of stopping and getting caught. So if you have things like bellies and offset joints, things like that, there's a high opportunity for things to get stuck. Whereas in the city system, and they're constantly maintaining their systems to keep them flowing properly.
I wouldn't even say maintaining. It's more that they're fixing. They have a full-time crew
they're
fixing and
constantly. And for them, it's different. You know, they've got insurance policies and things like that. And when a city sewer backs up, it affects several homes. And you call the insurance company, they come in, they clean up the mess. But if it's my home and it's on me, especially where homeowners insurance things don't often cover a lot of this stuff, it comes straight out of my pocket.
Homeowners insurance doesn't cover sewer backups?
A lot of times they'll cover the cleanup, but not actually fixing it.
Really?
Whereas we all pay taxes and things to the city, and that's what they use to fix theirs. And so for them, it's just they've got this bank of money sitting aside specifically for fixing sewer lines because they know from experience they're going to have to fix a lot of them and replace a lot of them. Whereas homeowners, we're not quite as prepared as they are. And we don't have people paying us every month to put into our bank for our sewer line.
So if my sewer line fails, it's possible that my insurance isn't going to cover that?
It's likely. Yeah.
So are there riders that you add on to your policy? Like you can get specific fire insurance and flood insurance and earthquake insurance.
Yeah, and this is all very specific to your policy, your insurance company. Some of them do offer riders. Most of them will only cover what's on your property, and in most cases, it's only what's within the footprint of your home. And so the cleanup portion is often covered, but actually fixing the pipe, if you want to cover anything outside your home, it's a rider. Yeah, it's not typically part of a regular policy.
And the stuff in your yard, until it gets to the city, that stuff is your responsibility.
Absolutely.
So you've got this big chunk of sewer main line that is, it's not impervious. It is susceptible to, aging and breaking down and failing. That is not covered by anyone.
Right.
Not covered by anyone's insurance. The city's not going to pick up the tab.
The city's not going to pick up the tab. And even in, especially where we're at, where the city main, there's just one main for each street right in the middle of the street. Homeowners are in most cases responsible all the way to that city main. So under the sidewalk, under the curb and gutter, underneath the road. And that's the stuff that your insurance in most cases is not going to pick up. And so
they might cover the stuff in your yard, but they're not going to cover out.
Yeah, in most cases. And even that stuff in your yard, that's where you've got to get real technical with riders and things like that on your policy. Because your homeowner insurance policy typically is designed to cover anything within the footprint of your home. Anything outside the walls of your house are not typically covered. There are some companies that make it a little more standard, very few. And so in most cases, you have to add that on, which means additional premium cost and things like that. If you're an insurance agent that's listening right now, and your insurance covers that damage and replacing your sewer main line as part of your regular policy, get at me. Leave me a comment, send me an email, mike.wilson@anyhourservices.com. I'll show you some love on the podcast. Yeah, we'll get that out there. Yeah, and there's a few, but for the most part, if it is even allowed by your insurance company, it's something you have to elect. And then even still, they usually will stop at the property line, just because the city owns everything past property line, but you technically have an easement more or less over your pipe where you are responsible. And because you're the only person who uses that portion of the line, and so you're the only person responsible for it.
Got it.
And so it gets gray. There are some areas where sewer districts have their own specific insurance policies for some of those portions, things like that. But for the most part, homeowners are responsible.
It's got to get messy also. Do you ever have situations where you have two different homes running into a pipe that connects that isn't the city's that then connects to the city?
We do see that, and in most cases then it still falls to the two homeowners that use it. There are even some cities around here, we've got Ogden City, where you cannot actually repair that shared portion of the line because they're by code required to be separate now. And so if a portion in the shared spot after they've tied together, if something goes wrong there, you're more or less forced to separate those lines and dig new ones in. And that's still on the homeowners. The city still doesn't cover any of that.
Yeah,
Being
the
a
funnest thing is
homeowner,
to get
like-
two homeowners to agree to split the cost.
I have seen friendships of 30 years just completely dissolved by sewer line problems.
Wow. What else you got to say, Matt? I saw you over there doodling. Was that just to keep yourself
He
busy?
drew a Pac-Man ghost.
Did you? Let me see. That's
He's so
weird.
entertained.
No, it's not a pep. It's not.
It looks like a guy with a beard.
Are you drawing like a sewer treatment monster?
Glad to see this episode's like
Riveting.
your interest. Everyone out there is
Everyone's
like,
so entertained.
Yeah,
all right.
this is fun.
Well, I was going to ask, did we cover what all you wanted to cover? But I don't know if you were listening.
Yeah, we covered it. I was listening. I'm a multitasker.
Multi-cataster.
You're the one that taught me about multitasking. All multitasking really means is you're only putting half your attention to each one, so neither one of them really get done.
Sounds like something I said.
Okay. Well, anything else that you feel like homeowners need to know? We went a lot of different places.
Covered a lot of things there.
So, but I thought it was interesting. Austin has a question.
I just want to make sure that I have this
safe.
straight. Everybody's poop and pee sits in a big barrel and gets baked by the sun for a little while and then gets dumped into our lakes.
Yep.
And we go play in it.
Yep.
That's wild.
Isn't it crazy?
It's gross.
The
is what
cool
it is.
thing is, though, like if you look at the science
That's why I
and
don't
everything,
swim.
Dude, that is
It makes-
wild. That like changes like my whole, it's like,
it makes you appreciate the nature of it, though. The fact that the ground cleans that water enough for us to be safe to go swim and play in it. It's really pretty cool.
does it get
There-
dumped into the rivers or just the lakes?
Both.
Both.
It depends on
What's closest.
where it's at.
Yeah.
Like around here, everything just goes straight to the lake. You got a big treatment plant in Provo that goes right to the lake. Now there's a lot to it. Like we said, it goes through screens and grinders and then the sun, and it's got holding containers to hold it for a while. But yeah.
Yeah.
And then it
essentially,
warms the lake.
You are swimming in water you once pooped in.
It's gross.
It is.
It's pretty cool, though.
Anything else? You have it right.
Yeah, you got it.
Well, that's the show. Tune in next Tuesday for another episode of In the House. I'd like to thank everyone that was here and enlightened us on the process. If you'd like to know more about Any Hour Services, visit anyhourservices.com. I've been your host, Mike Wilson, and you've been listening to In the House. Thanks for the assist there,
I got
Jason.
you. I got you.
See ya.